Today we have a story about two sisters whose quiet courage rewrote the rules of an entire county. This account was recovered from the parish records of Ashford County, Georgia, dated December 1894. What you are about to hear is a testament to dignity in the face of unspeakable cruelty. If you enjoyed this story, consider subscribing and becoming part of our community. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. We love hearing from our amazing viewers all around the world. My name is Evelyn Carter, and I set down this record so the truth might survive what memory would prefer to forget. I am 41 years of age, a seamstress by trade, and for 12 years I have worked in the textile mill on the edge of Ashford County. My hands are steady with needle and thread. My faith is simple. I have always tried to live quietly and harm no one, but there are some things that cannot stay quiet. It was the week before Christmas when I first heard about the twins. I was mending curtains in the parlor of Mrs. Rebecca Walsh, a kind woman who sometimes hired me for fine work. Her voice dropped low as she told me, her fingers twisting the edge of her shawl. "Baron Cyrus Grimwood has purchased 2 girls," she whispered. "Sisters, twins, no more than 12 years old. He calls them Christmas gifts for his sons." The words hung in the air like smoke. Baron Grimwood owned half the county, the mill where I worked, the land most folks farmed, the store where we bought our flour. He was a massive man with a grey beard and cold blue eyes that looked through you as if you were made of glass. People called him Baron, though no such title existed in America. He preferred it that way. It made him feel like royalty. His sons, Thomas and William, were men of 20 and 22. They had their father's cruelty, but not his cunning. They rode through town on black horses, laughing too loud, their faces flushed with drink. "Gifts," Mrs. Walsh repeated, and her eyes filled with tears, as if they were dolls. I knew what this meant. We all knew, but knowing and speaking are different things in a town where one man owns your livelihood. The girls arrived 3 days before Christmas. I saw them being led through the town square in the back of a wagon, holding hands. They were beautiful children with dark skin and large, frightened eyes. They wore thin dresses despite the cold. One of them was coughing. I watched from the mill window as the wagon passed. My supervisor, Mr. Pike, a narrow-faced man who did the Baron's bidding, noticed me watching. "Get back to your station, Evelyn," he said quietly, "and mind your business." That night I could not sleep. I thought of my own daughter, lost to fever 6 years prior. She had been 10 years old, the same age, perhaps, as those twins. The Baron's estate sat on a hill outside town, surrounded by iron gates and winter-bare trees. Smoke rose from its many chimneys. Lamps burned in the windows at all hours. The house had 30 rooms, people said, and a ballroom that had not been used since the Baron's wife died 20 years ago. On Christmas Eve, I saw one of the twins in town. She was walking beside Thomas Grimwood, her hand held tight in his. She moved stiffly, as if every step hurt. Her eyes were cast down. When they passed the church, she glanced up at the bell tower with such longing that my heart twisted. That night, after the Christmas service, I spoke with Pastor Daniel Green, a good man with tired eyes who tried his best to shepherd a flock that included wolves. "Pastor," I said quietly, standing in the cold churchyard, "those girls I know." "Evelyn," his voice was heavy, "I know. Can nothing be done?" He looked at me for a long moment. "The law is what the Baron says it is here. You know that. Then the law is wrong." He did not argue. He only said, "Be careful." I went home that night with ice in my chest. I thought of those twins holding hands in the wagon. I thought of the way one had looked at the church bell, as if hearing a sound the rest of us could not. 3 days after Christmas, I was called to the Baron's estate. Mr. Pike delivered the message himself at the mill. "The Baron requires a seamstress," he said. "He has requested you specifically." I felt every eye in the mill turn toward me. "Why me?" I asked. Mr. Pike's expression was unreadable. He did not say, "You are to arrive tomorrow at 8 in the morning." That night I could not eat. I told my sister Martha what had happened, and she gripped my hand so tight it hurt. "Do not go," she whispered. But we both knew I had no choice. The Baron did not make requests. He gave commands. I arrived at the estate the next morning as the sun rose pale and cold. The iron gates stood open. A servant, an older black man named Joseph, met me at the door. His face was carefully blank. "Miss Carter," he said, "follow me." He led me through halls lined with dark paintings and closed doors. The house was silent except for our footsteps. Then, from somewhere above, I heard it, a child singing, 2 voices, harmonizing, a hymn I recognized from church. But the singing stopped abruptly, cut off mid-word, followed by the sound of a door slamming. Joseph did not look at me. "The sewing room is this way," he said, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled my blood, that whatever happened in this house would require more than needle and thread to mend. The sewing room sat at the end of a long hallway on the 2nd floor. Sunlight struggled through windows filmed with dust. Bolts of fabric lined the walls, silks and velvets in deep colors that seemed to swallow light. A large table dominated the center, covered with half-finished garments. Joseph gestured to the table. "The Baron's sons require new suits. You are to take measurements and complete the work within 2 weeks." "I understand," I said quietly. He turned to leave, then paused. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Keep your head down, Miss Carter. Do your work, nothing more." Before I could respond, he was gone. I set down my sewing basket and examined the fabric. Fine wool, expensive thread, silver buttons, work meant to impress. I was measuring the first length of cloth when I heard footsteps in the hall. Thomas Grimwood entered without knocking. He was a tall young man with his father's cold eyes and a mouth that seemed always on the verge of a cruel smile. He smelled of tobacco and something sour. "The seamstress," he said, looking me over as one might examine livestock. "My father says you do quality work." "I do my best, sir," I replied, keeping my eyes on the fabric. "See that you do." He walked around the table, running his finger along the wood. "We have guests arriving for the new year. Everything must be perfect." "Yes, sir." He stopped directly across from me. "Have you seen the new additions to our household?" My hand stilled on the measuring tape. "Sir, the twins. Pretty little things. Father's gift to us." His smile widened. "They are learning their place. One learns faster than the other. The stubborn one requires more instruction." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "I am here only to sew, Mr. Grimwood, of course." He laughed. "But you will see them, I imagine. They are to serve at the New Year dinner. Father insists they look presentable. You may be asked to alter their dresses." He left then, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. I stood alone in the sewing room, my heart pounding against my ribs. For 3 days I worked in that room, arriving at dawn and leaving at dusk. The house breathed around me, footsteps overhead, doors opening and closing, voices raised and then suddenly silent. I kept my head down as Joseph had advised. I focused on straight seams and even stitches. On the 4th day, they brought the twins to me. The door opened and a stern-faced housekeeper named Mrs. Pritchard entered, gripping the girls by their thin arms. "These 2 need proper dresses for the dinner," she said. "Simple but decent. Can you manage it?" "Yes, ma'am," I said. She shoved the girls forward and left, locking the door behind her. For a moment, the 3 of us stood in silence. The twins were identical, the same heart-shaped faces, the same dark eyes, the same way of standing as if ready to run. But one had a bruise on her cheek, purple and fresh. The other held her sister's hand so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. "My name is Evelyn," I said softly. "I am going to take your measurements for new dresses. I will not hurt you." The girl with the bruised eye would learn her name was Ruth. Stared at me with an expression far too old for her young face. Her sister, Naomi, kept her eyes on the floor. I worked slowly, gently, speaking in low tones about simple things, the color of the fabric, the pattern I would use, how I learned to sew from my own mother. Gradually, Ruth's shoulders relaxed slightly. Naomi's breathing became less rapid. "You sing beautifully," I said quietly as I measured Ruth's shoulders. "I heard you the other day." Ruth's eyes met mine. "We are not supposed to sing anymore. Master Thomas says our voices disturb him." The word master from a child's mouth made my hands shake. I steadied them. "Sometimes singing is the only thing that helps," I said. "Are you a slave to—" Naomi asked suddenly, her voice small. I knelt, so I was at their eye level. "No, child, and neither are you. Not in the eyes of God or the law, whatever this house pretends." Ruth's expression changed, something fierce and desperate flickering there. "Then why can no one help us?" It was a question I had no good answer for. "I do not know," I said honestly, "but I am here now, and I see you." That night, I lay awake thinking of Ruth's bruised face and Naomi's frightened silence. I thought of how Ruth had asked why no one would help them, as if she had already learned that hoping was dangerous. The next morning, I arrived to find the sewing room door ajar. Inside, Fabric had been torn from the bolts. Scissors lay open on the floor, and pinned to my work table was a note in harsh, slanted handwriting. "Mind your conversation, seamstress. These walls hear everything." My blood went cold. I cleaned the room carefully, my hands trembling. When Joseph came to check on my progress, he saw the note before I could hide it. His face remained impassive, but he said quietly, "I told you, Miss Carter, nothing more than your work." "They are children," I whispered. "They are property," he said, his voice flat and dead. "As I am, as you will be if you are not careful. The Baron does not tolerate interference." He left me alone with those words echoing in the silence. That evening, as I packed my sewing basket to leave, I heard it again, the singing, fainter now, muffled, as if coming from behind thick walls. The hymn from before, but this time the melody broke, hitched, started again. Then I heard a man's voice, sharp and angry. The singing stopped. A door slammed somewhere in the house, and in the sudden quiet that followed, I heard something else, a soft, rhythmic thumping, like a fist against a wall. 3 beats, pause, 3 beats, pause, 3 beats, a code, a signal, a plea. I stood frozen in the hallway, my basket heavy in my hands, knowing that leaving meant abandoning those girls to whatever darkness waited behind. Those locked doors. But Joseph's warning rang in my ears. The Baron does not tolerate interference. I walked out into the winter dusk, the sound of those 3 beats following me all the way home. January arrived with bitter cold and ice that made the roads treacherous. I returned to the Baron's estate each day, my fingers numb, my mind racing. The suits were nearly finished. The dresses for the twins were complete, simple grey wool with white collars, as Mrs. Pritchard had specified. Servants' clothes, though the girls were meant to be something else entirely. Something worse. I had not seen Ruth or Naomi since the day I took their measurements, but I heard them. At odd hours, I caught fragments of whispers in the hallway, footsteps running quickly then stopping, and once, late in the afternoon, crying that was hastily muffled. The house had a pattern, I realized, a rhythm of cruelty that repeated like a terrible song. Morning, silence. The Baron breakfasted alone. His sons slept late. Afternoon, raised voices from the eastern wing, doors locking, keys turning. Evening, the dining room filling with cigar smoke and laughter. Joseph and the other servants moving like shadows. And somewhere above, the sound of children trying to be invisible. I began to notice other things too. Mrs. Pritchard kept a ring of keys at her waist, but one key, a brass one with an ornate handle, hung separate from the others. She touched it often, as if reassuring herself it was still there. That key opened the eastern wing, I was certain, the locked hallway where I had heard the singing stop so abruptly. On the 8th day, I met someone unexpected. I was leaving the estate at dusk, when a black woman near my age stopped me on the drive. She wore a cook's apron and had kind eyes webbed with worry lines. "You are the seamstress," she said. Not a question. "Yes, Evelyn Carter. My name is Clara Bennett. I cook for this house." She glanced back at the mansion, then stepped closer. "You have seen the twins?" "Once," I said carefully. "They are in danger." Her voice was urgent and low. "Real danger, Miss Carter. Not just," she struggled for words, "not just the usual cruelties. Thomas Grimwood has plans for those girls. Terrible plans." "What kind of plans?" She shook her head. "I only hear pieces, but I know they mean to break them, to make them believe they are nothing. And when they believe it thoroughly enough." She did not finish. "What can be done?" I asked, though I already knew the answer would bring no comfort. "There is a lawyer in the county seat, a man named Howard Mitchell. He has fought the Baron before on land disputes. Lost, mostly, but he is not afraid." She pressed a scrap of paper into my hand. "His address. If someone were to bring him evidence, real evidence, he might act." "Evidence of what?" "The law does not protect. The law says no man can hold another as property anymore." Clara interrupted. "But the law must be enforced, and no one has enforced it here because everyone fears the Baron. But if someone could prove he is holding those girls illegally, keeping them against their will, preventing their freedom of movement, there are statutes, Miss Carter, federal statutes." Hope stirred in my chest, small and fragile. How would one gather such evidence? Records, documents, proof of purchase, if such obscene papers exist, or testimony from the girls themselves. Though getting them out to give it, she trailed off, her expression grim. That night, I sat at my small kitchen table, staring at the address Clara had given me. My sister Martha watched me with worried eyes. "You are thinking of doing something foolish," she said. "I am thinking of doing something necessary, Evelyn. The Baron will crush you. He will see you lose your position at the mill. He will make sure no one in this county will hire you. We will starve." "Then we will starve," I said quietly. "But I will not pretend I did not see what I saw. I will not pretend I did not hear what I heard." Martha was silent for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and gripped my hand. "If you are going to do this, do it carefully, do it smart, and do not do it alone." The next day, I returned to the estate with a plan forming in my mind, like ice crystals. I would need to access the Baron's study where he kept his business records. I would need to move through the house unseen, and I would need help. Joseph found me in the sewing room that afternoon. He closed the door softly behind him and stood with his back against it. "Miss Clara spoke to you," he said. I nodded slowly. "You mean to take action against the Baron?" It was not a question, but I answered anyway. "I mean to see those girls freed." His face, usually so carefully neutral, cracked just slightly. Something like pain flickered there. "I have worked in this house for 18 years, Miss Carter. I have seen things that would turn your hair white. I have watched good people try to stand against the Baron. They are all gone now, broken or disappeared." "Then it is past time someone succeeded," I said. He studied me for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small brass key. "The eastern wing, third door on the right. That is where they keep the girls locked at night." He placed the key in my hand. "I did not give you this. If you are caught, I will deny everything. I understand. The Baron keeps a ledger in his study. It details every transaction, every piece of property, every person he considers his." Joseph's voice was barely audible. "If such a ledger were to reach the right hands, it would be damning." "Where is the study?" "First floor, western corner. He locks it, but the lock is old. A hatpin would open it if applied correctly." We stood in silence for a moment, conspirators in the dim light of the sewing room. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. Joseph's eyes were distant. "I had a daughter once. She was sold south when she was 11 years old. I never saw her again. That was before the war, before the law changed. But the law means nothing if good people do nothing." He turned to leave, then paused. "Move quickly, Miss Carter. The New Year dinner is in 4 days." After that, he did not need to finish. That evening, as the sun set blood-red over the frozen hills, I sat with the brass key heavy in my pocket and thought of Ruth's bruised face and Naomi's frightened silence. I thought of my own daughter, lost to fever, whose last words had been, "Mama, do not let me be alone." And I knew that whatever the cost, I could not let those girls face the darkness alone. The house seemed to watch me as I left that night, its narrow windows like eyes, its tall chimneys breathing smoke into the winter sky. From somewhere inside, I heard 3 slow beats against a wall, a code, a signal, a prayer. I tapped 3 times on the iron gate as I passed. An answer, a promise, a vow. The night I chose was moonless and bitter cold. The Baron was hosting a dinner for several businessmen from the county seat, their carriages crowding the circular drive. Music and laughter drifted from the dining room. Servants moved frantically between the kitchen and the great hall. In the chaos, one seamstress might move through the house unnoticed. I had told Mrs. Pritchard I needed to make final adjustments to William Grimwood's suit jacket. She waved me in impatiently, too busy barking orders at the kitchen staff to pay me mind. I climbed the servants' stairs with my sewing basket, my heart hammering against my ribs. But instead of turning toward the sewing room, I descended a different set of stairs to the first floor, moving quickly toward the western corner where Joseph had said the study waited. The hallway was dark and quiet, far from the noise of the dinner party. I found the door icily heavy oak with a brass nameplate that read C. Grimwood, Private. I glanced behind me once, then knelt and pulled a long hatpin from my basket. My hands shook as I worked the lock. It took 3 tries, each second stretching into eternity, before I heard the soft click of tumblers falling into place. The study was a dark cave of leather and wood. A massive desk dominated the space, its surface covered with neat stacks of papers. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with legal volumes and ledgers. A portrait of the Baron hung above the fireplace, his painted eyes following me as I moved. I lit a small candle and began searching. The drawers were locked, but the same hatpin that had opened the door worked on the desk. Inside the 3rd drawer, I found it, a ledger bound in black leather, its pages filled with the Baron's precise handwriting. I opened it with trembling hands. The entries made my stomach turn. Properties acquired, debts collected, and there, near the back, dated December 15th, 1894, purchase of 2 Negro girls, twins, age 12, from G. Watts of Charleston. Sum, $600. Purpose, household service and companionship for T&W Grimwood. The words were so clinical, so cold, as if Ruth and Naomi were furniture, as if their lives could be valued at $300 each. But this was evidence, proof that the Baron had purchased human beings 30 years after such transactions became illegal, proof that could not be explained away or dismissed. I was copying the entry into my notebook when I heard footsteps in the hall. I froze, candle flame guttering. The footsteps stopped outside the study door. The handle turned slowly. I had seconds to act. I slid the ledger back into the drawer, shoved my notebook into my basket, and snuffed the candle. The room plunged into darkness just as the door opened. A silhouette stood in the doorway, backlit by the hall lamp. Then a voice to us, Grimwood's voice, slurred with drink. "Who is there?" I held my breath, pressed against the side of the desk, praying the shadows would hide me. He stepped into the room, swaying slightly. "I know someone is in here. I can smell you." My mind raced. If he found me, everything would be over. The Baron would destroy not just me but anyone who had helped me. Clara, Joseph, the lawyer whose name sat on the paper in my pocket. Thomas moved closer, close enough that I could smell the whiskey on him. His hand reached for the desk, inches from where I crouched. Then, from somewhere above, a voice called out, "Thomas, your father wants you in the dining room." Now. Thomas cursed under his breath. Coming. He stood there a moment longer, so close I could hear his breathing. Then he turned and stumbled out, leaving the door open behind him. I waited until his footsteps faded, then slipped out of the study and up the servants' stairs, my legs weak with relief and terror. But I was not finished. I still had the brass key Joseph had given me, and I had promised those girls I would not leave them in the dark. The eastern wing was silent when I reached it, the locked hallway lit only by a single lamp at its end. One counted 3 doors on the right and stopped at the third. My hand shook as I fitted the key into the lock. The door opened onto a small, cold room, a single narrow bed, a chamber pot in the corner, and huddled together on the bed, holding each other, were Ruth and Naomi. They stared at me with wide, terrified eyes. "I am not here to hurt you," I whispered. "My name is Evelyn. I am going to help you." "They will punish us if they find you here," Ruth said, her voice hoarse. "They will punish you too, I know." I knelt beside the bed. "But I have found proof that what the Baron is doing is against the law. Real law, federal law. There is a lawyer who can help, but he needs your testimony. He needs you to be brave enough to tell the truth. The truth." Naomi's laugh was bitter and broken. "The truth is that no one cares what happens to girls like us." "I care," I said, "and I am not the only one. There are others in this house who want you free, but we must move carefully. The Baron is powerful, but the law is stronger if we can make it work." Ruth studied my face, searching for deception. Then she asked the question that nearly broke me. "If we help you, and it does not work, what will happen to us?" I could have lied. I could have promised safety, but they deserved the truth. "If it does not work, things will be worse for you. Much worse. The Baron will know you spoke against him, and his cruelty will be terrible." "Then why should we risk it?" Naomi asked. "Because living as property is not living," I said quietly. "Because you deserve to be free. Because your silence is what men like the Baron count on." I paused. "And because sometimes the only way to survive is to fight back, even when you are terrified." The twins looked at each other, some silent communication passing between them. Then Ruth nodded once. "Tell us what to do." I outlined the plan quickly. In 2 days, I would take them to the county seat under the pretense of fitting them for new dresses at a shop there. Once away from the estate, we would go directly to the lawyer's office. Joseph would create a distraction at the house to delay discovery. Clara would pack them food and warm clothes. It was a fragile plan. A dozen things could go wrong, but it was the only chance we had. As I turned to leave, Ruth grabbed my hand. "Miss Evelyn, what if we are not worth it? What if you lose everything and we are still not worth it?" I knelt again and looked into her young, haunted face. "You are worth everything," I said. "Do not ever let anyone tell you different." I left them then, locking the door behind me and slipping back through the house like a ghost. But as I reached the main staircase, I heard a voice behind me. Miss Carter. I turned to find the Baron himself standing in the shadows of the hallway. My blood turned to ice. He stepped into the light, his massive frame blocking my path. His cold blue eyes studied me with the same expression he might give a suspicious contract. "You have been very dedicated to your work," he said softly, coming and going at odd hours, moving through my house with such purpose. I wanted the suits to be perfect. "Sir," I managed. "Of course," he smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Tell me, Miss Carter, have you noticed anything unusual during your time here?" "Unusual, sir. Voices where there should be none. Doors open that should be locked. Keys going missing." Each word was measured and cold. Perhaps a seamstress who asks too many questions and goes where she has not been invited. I kept my voice steady, though my heart was racing. "I have noticed only that you keep a fine house, sir, and that my work is nearly complete." He studied me for a long, terrible moment. Then he stepped aside. "See that it stays completed, Miss Carter, and see that you remember your place. This county has no room for troublemakers. You understand me?" "Yes, sir." "Good, because it would be a shame if you were to lose your position at the mill, and it would be even more unfortunate if your sister Martha were to face difficulties with her landlord. I believe he owes me money. You see, I could call in that debt at any time." The threat hung between us, sharp as a blade. "I understand perfectly, sir," I said. He nodded once and walked past me toward the dining room, but as he reached the doorway, he paused and spoke without turning. "Those girls are mine, Miss Carter, bought and paid for. Remember that." I stood alone in the hallway, my entire body shaking, knowing that the Baron was watching now, knowing that our fragile plan had just become infinitely more dangerous. But I also knew that I had seen the ledger. I had the evidence, and I had made a promise to 2 frightened children that I intended to keep, even if it cost me everything. Sleep did not come that night. I sat at my kitchen table while Martha paced, her face drawn with worry. "He threatened us directly," she said for the 3rd time. "Evelyn, he knows. He suspects something. He suspects I have a conscience," I replied. "But he does not know what I have found. Not yet." I had copied 3 pages from the ledger, documenting not just the purchase of Ruth and Naomi, but other transactions the Baron had made. Land seized from families who could not pay debts, wages withheld from workers, property acquired through intimidation, a pattern of cruelty that went back years. The next morning, I went to the mill as usual, my copied pages hidden in the lining of my coat. Mr. Pike watched me from his office window, his narrow face unreadable. Everyone seemed to be watching me now, or perhaps fear was making me see threats everywhere. At lunch, I slipped away to the post office and sent a letter to Howard Mitchell, the lawyer in the county seat. I kept it brief. "Sir, I have evidence of illegal activity by Baron Cyrus Grimwood, evidence that involves the unlawful detention of 2 children. I request a meeting at your earliest convenience. I am willing to testify. The matter is urgent." I signed it and paid extra for quick delivery. The postal clerk, an older man named Mr. Henry, who had always been kind, looked at me with concern as he took the letter. "Miss Carter, are you certain you want to send this? Why do you ask?" He lowered his voice. "Because the Baron has friends everywhere, including, I am sorry to say, at the post office. Letters addressed to lawyers sometimes find their way to interested parties before they reach their destination." My heart sank. "Then what can I do?" Mr. Henry thought for a moment. "My nephew drives the mail wagon to the county seat 3 times a week. He leaves at dawn tomorrow. If you were to give him the letter personally, he would ensure it reached only the intended recipient. He is a good boy, discreet." "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you." I rewrote the letter that evening and met Mr. Henry's nephew, a quiet young man named David, at the edge of town before sunrise. He took the letter and promised it would reach Mr. Mitchell by noon. Now all I could do was wait. I returned to the estate that day, knowing it might be my last visit. The suits were finished, pressed and perfect. I had no more reason to be there, but I needed to see Ruth and Naomi once more, to tell them the plan was in motion. Joseph met me at the door. His face was grave. "Miss Carter, you should not be here today." "Why?" "The Baron is in a mood. Something has set him off. He has been raging all morning, throwing things in his study." Joseph's voice dropped. "And the twins, they are being moved. Mrs. Pritchard is packing their things. I heard the Baron say they will be sent to his brother's plantation in Mississippi by the end of the week." My blood ran cold. Mississippi, where no one would find them. where whatever horrors awaited them would happen far from any witness. I must see them, I said. Too dangerous. The Baron is watching everything now. Then help me create a distraction. Please, Joseph. This is our last chance. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Go to the sewing room. Wait there. In 20 minutes, you will hear commotion from the kitchen. Fire alarm. Small one, nothing dangerous, but it will draw everyone there. You will have 5 minutes, no more. Thank you. The 20 minutes felt like hours. I paced the sewing room, my mind racing. If the Baron was sending the girls away in days, we could not wait for the lawyer's response. We would have to act immediately, improvise, take terrible risks. Then I heard it. Shouts from downstairs, the clang of a bell, running feet, fire in the kitchen. Someone yelled, all hands needed. I ran to the eastern wing, the brass key already in my hand. The hallway was empty. I unlocked the third door and slipped inside. Ruth and Naomi sat on their bed, their few possessions in a small cloth bundle. They looked up at me with hollow eyes. We are being sent away, Ruth said flatly. To Mississippi, Mrs. Pritchard told us this morning. I know, I said, kneeling before them, and that is why we are leaving now. Today, this moment. Naomi shook her head. We cannot. They will catch us before we reach the gates. Not if we are clever. I pulled my heavy winter shawl from my basket. Wrap this around both of you. Stay close to me. Move like servants on an errand. If anyone stops us, I will say I am taking you to be fitted for traveling clothes in town. We walk out the front door as if we have every right to be there. And then, Ruth asked, and then we run. It was not a good plan. It was barely a plan at all, but it was all we had. I bundled them in my shawl, hiding their faces. We moved quickly through the house, down the servants' stairs, past the chaos in the kitchen where smoke was billowing from a deliberately burned pot. Joseph caught my eye for just a moment as we passed. I nodded once. He returned it. Then we were in the main hall, the front door before us. Mrs. Pritchard appeared suddenly from a side room. Where are you taking those girls? She demanded. The Baron requested they be fitted for proper traveling clothes, I said, my voice steady, though my heart was pounding. In town, I am to have them back by evening. She frowned. He said nothing of this to me. Perhaps he forgot to mention it, ma'am. He has been very busy this morning with the fire and all. She studied us suspiciously. Then a crash came from the kitchen, another pot, I realized. Another distraction, courtesy of Joseph. Mrs. Pritchard turned toward the sound. Fine, but have them back by 4 o'clock, or you will answer to the Baron personally. We walked out the front door into the cold January air, down the steps, across the drive, through the iron gates. 1 step, 2 steps, 10 steps, waiting for someone to shout, waiting for hands to grab us, waiting for the illusion to shatter. But no one called out. No one stopped us. When we reached the road, I looked back once at the Baron's estate, its grey stone walls and narrow windows. Then I took the twins' hands. Now we run, I said, and we did. We ran down the frozen road toward town, our breath making clouds in the cold air, our feet slipping on ice, our hearts hammering with terror and hope in equal measure. Behind us, faintly, I heard a bell ringing, an alarm. They had discovered us missing. Faster, I urged. There is a barn just ahead. We can hide there. We reached the barn owned by a farmer named Mr. Jackson, who sometimes bought eggs from Marthand, slipped inside. The twins huddled in the hay, shaking from cold and fear. I tried to think, to plan our next move. The county seat was 8 miles away, too far to walk in daylight without being seen. But I knew someone who might help. Mrs. Rebecca Walsh, the kind woman whose curtains I had mended. She lived 2 miles north, and had once told me, if you ever need anything, Miss Carter, you need only ask. Stay here, I told the twins. Stay hidden and silent. I will return within the hour. What if you do not return? Naomi asked, her voice small. I pulled the copied ledger pages from my coat and pressed them into Ruth's hands. Then take these, go to the county seat. Find a man named Howard Mitchell. He is a lawyer. Show him these papers and tell him everything. Promise me. Ruth clutched the papers. I promise. I ran then, through frozen fields and bare woods, until I reached Mrs. Walsh's modest home. She opened the door with surprise. Evelyn, what on earth? I need help, I said simply. 2 children need help, and I have no one else to ask. Mrs. Walsh looked at me for a long moment. Then she pulled me inside. Tell me everything. I did. The whole story spilled out: the twins, the Baron, the ledger, the escape. When I finished, Mrs. Walsh sat silent for a moment. Then she rose and went to her closet. "My husband's wagon is in the barn. The horse is old but steady. I can have you to the county seat by nightfall if we leave now. Mrs. Walsh, the Baron will know you helped. He will. I am 63 years old, Evelyn. I have lived too long watching evil flourish because good people stay silent. If I cannot do this one thing, then what was my life for?" We loaded the wagon with blankets and food. Then we rode back to Mr. Jackson's barn, where Ruth and Naomi waited. The girls climbed into the wagon bed, and we covered them with hay and blankets. Then we set out on the long road to the county seat, the winter sun already sinking toward the horizon. We had made it perhaps for miles, when we heard the sound of horses behind us, 3 riders, coming fast, even at a distance. I recognized the lead rider's massive frame. The Baron had come for his property. Mrs. Walsh's hands tightened on the reins. "Hold on," she said quietly, and snapped the leather hard. The old horse lurched forward into a faster trot, but we both knew it was no use. The Baron's black stallion could outpace our wagon easily. "Miss Evelyn," Ruth's voice came from beneath the blankets, tight with fear. "What do we do?" "Stay hidden," I hissed. "No matter what happens, stay hidden and stay silent." The riders closed the distance quickly. Within minutes, the Baron pulled alongside us, his sons flanking him. All 3 men had faces like thunderclouds. "Stop the wagon," the Baron commanded, his voice cutting through the cold air like a blade. Mrs. Walsh kept driving. I said, "Stop." He reached out and grabbed the horse's bridle, forcing us to halt. We sat in tense silence. The Baron dismounted and walked to the wagon's side, his eyes burning with cold fury. His sons remained mounted, hands resting on rifles slung across their saddles. "Mrs. Walsh," the Baron said with false courtesy, "what a surprise to find you on this road at this hour." "I am taking my friend home," Mrs. Walsh replied, her voice steady. "Is there a law against that?" "No law at all. But I wonder, might you be carrying additional passengers?" He moved toward the wagon bed. "Perhaps 2 passengers who left my property without permission." "I do not know what you mean," Mrs. Walsh said. The Baron smiled, but it was a terrible thing to see. "I think you do." He reached for the blankets. "Stop." The voice came not from me or Mrs. Walsh, but from ahead on the road. A man emerged from the tree line on horseback, middle-aged, dressed in a dark suit, with a satchel across his shoulder. Behind him rode 4 other men, including the county sheriff, a grizzled man named Maurice. "Mr. Grimwood," the man in the suit said calmly. "I am Howard Mitchell, attorney at law. I have been looking for you." The Baron's face went pale, then red. "This is none of your concern, Mitchell. On the contrary, it is precisely my concern." The lawyer dismounted and walked forward, pulling papers from his satchel. "I have here a complaint filed this morning by Miss Evelyn Carter, regarding to minor children being held illegally on your property. I also have a federal marshal's warrant to investigate said complaint. Sheriff Morris has agreed to assist me." The Baron laughed, but there was an edge of panic in it. "You are talking nonsense. Those girls are indentured servants, legally bound to my household." "Indenture requires consent and a legal contract," Mitchell said. "Where are the contracts?" "In my study. I do not carry such papers on my person." "Convenient." Mitchell turned to Mrs. Walsh. "Ma'am, am I correct in understanding you have 2 young girls in your wagon?" "You are correct, sir." "And are they there of their own free will?" Before Mrs. Walsh could answer, Ruth's voice came from beneath the blankets. "We are, sir. We are running from that man. He bought us like we were horses. He hurts us. His sons hurt us. We just want to be free." The blanket shifted, and Ruth sat up, her face pale but determined. Naomi rose beside her. The bruises on their faces told a story no words could improve upon. The Baron's sons shifted uncomfortably on their horses. The Baron himself went very still. "Those girls are lying," he said flatly. "They are troubled children, prone to fantasy and deception. I took them in out of Christian charity." "Then you will not mind if we examine your records?" Mitchell interrupted. "The sheriff and I will need to see all documentation related to these children. Purchase agreements, if any, indenture contracts, school enrollment, medical care, everything. This is an outrage. You cannot simply invade a man's home. The warrant says I can." Mitchell's voice was hard now. "You have 2 choices, Mr. Grimwood. Cooperate with this investigation voluntarily. or the sheriff will place you under arrest for obstruction, and we will search your property by force." Sheriff Morris spoke for the first time, his voice gravelly. "I known you a long time. Cyrus and I have looked the other way on many things, because you have power and money. But if what these girls are saying is true, if you have been holding children against their will, then not even your money will save you." The Baron looked at each of us in turn, the lawyer, the sheriff, the twins, Mrs. Walsh, and finally me. His eyes promised retribution, but he was trapped, and he knew it. "Fine," he spat. "Search whatever you like. You will find nothing but legal business dealings." "We shall see," Mitchell said. He turned to Mrs. Walsh. "Ma'am, would you be willing to take these children somewhere safe while we conduct our investigation?" "My home is open to them," she said immediately. "Then go. I will come to take their formal statements this evening." As Mrs. Walsh turned the wagon round, the Baron called out, "Miss Carter." I looked back at him, my heart pounding. "You have made a grave error," he said quietly. "Even if your lawyer finds some technicality, some minor irregularity, you will pay for this. Your sister will pay. Everyone who helped you will pay. I will see to it personally." I met his gaze and spoke words I never imagined I would have the courage to say. "You may try, sir, but the whole county will be watching now, and you cannot destroy us all." The wagon rolled away, leaving the Baron standing in the frozen road with his sons and the forces of law he had always believed himself above. That evening, at Mrs. Walsh's warm kitchen table, Ruth and Naomi gave their testimony to Mr. Mitchell. They spoke haltingly at first, then with growing confidence. They described the purchase, the locked rooms, the threats, the punishments. They described how Thomas and William Grimwood had told them they were property now, that no one would believe them if they spoke. That resistance would only bring worse suffering. Mitchell wrote it all down carefully. When they finished, he looked at them with something like wonder. "You are very brave," he said, "both of you. What you have done today will change things. Perhaps not as quickly or completely as we would wish, but you have started something important. Will we really be free?" Naomi asked. "Yes," Mitchell said firmly. "I promise you that." 2 days later, the county newspaper ran a front-page story. Baron Grimwood accused of illegal detention. Twin girls rescued by local women. The article detailed the investigation, the evidence found in the Baron's ledger, not just of Ruth and Naomi's purchase, but of other illegal activities spanning years. It described how a simple seamstress and a kind widow had risked everything to save 2 children. The town began to whisper, then to talk openly, then to demand answers. But the Baron was not finished. Not yet, and neither were we. The hearing was set for February 5, 1895, in the county courthouse, a brick building, with tall windows that let in cold winter light. The benches filled early with townspeople, some supporting the Baron, many more curious to see if the impossible might happen. A man of power held accountable. I sat in the front row with Mrs. Walsh, Martha, Clara Bennett from the Baron's kitchen, and Joseph, who had finally given his official statement despite the danger. Howard Mitchell stood at the prosecutor's table, his papers organized in neat stacks. Across the aisle, the Baron sat with 3 lawyers from the state capitol, men in expensive suits who looked at us like we were insects. Ruth and Naomi sat beside me, dressed in simple but clean dresses Mrs. Walsh had sewn for them. They held hands tightly. Ruth's bruises had faded, but Naomi still flinched at sudden movements. Judge Harrison Caldwell entered, and we rose. He was an old man with white hair and a face lined by years of trying to find justice in a world that often preferred convenience to truth. He had known the Baron for 30 years. Everyone wondered whose side he would take. The proceeding began with the Baron's lawyers arguing for dismissal. "Your Honor, these accusations are baseless. Mr. Grimwood is a pillar of this community. He took in 2 orphaned children out of charity." "They were not orphaned," Mitchell interrupted. Standing, Ruth and Naomi Williams had a mother and father in Charleston. They were taken from them fraudulently and sold in violation of the 13th Amendment. He presented the evidence. Methodically, the ledger entries in the Baron's own handwriting documenting purchase of 2 Negro girls, testimony from a shipping clerk who confirmed the Baron had paid for their transport, letters between the Baron and the man in Charleston who had facilitated the sale. The Baron's lawyers tried to argue it was indenture, not slavery. Mitchell destroyed that argument by asking one simple question. If these girls were indentured servants with legal contracts, why were they locked in their rooms at night? Why were they prevented from attending school or church? Why were they beaten when they resisted? The lawyers had no good answer. Then Mitchell called Ruth to testify. She walked to the witness stand slowly, her small frame swallowed by the chair. The Baron's lead lawyer, a man named Whitmore, stood to object. "Your Honor, this child cannot be considered a reliable witness. She is young, uneducated, and lightly coached. I will decide who is reliable." "Mr. Whitmore," Judge Caldwell said sharply, "the child may testify." Mitchell approached Ruth gently. "Please state your name for the record." "Ruth Elizabeth Williams." Her voice was quiet but steady. "How old are you, Ruth?" 12 years old. "Sir, can you tell the court how you came to be in Baron Grimwood's house?" Ruth took a breath. Then she told her story. She described living in Charleston with her mother and sister, how a man had come saying there was work for them in Georgia, good wages and schooling, how their mother had been desperate after their father died, how they had been put on a train and handed over to the Baron like packages. "What happened when you arrived at the Baron's estate?" Mitchell asked. "He looked at us like we were animals he had bought. He said we belonged to him now, that we would serve his sons and do whatever we were told, and if we caused trouble, we would be sorry." "Did you cause trouble?" "We tried to escape once. The second week we were there, we ran for the gate." Ruth's voice wavered. "They caught us in the woods. Mr. Thomas, the Baron's son, he said we needed to learn. He locked us in the cellar for 2 days with no food, just water, and it was so dark, there was a stirring in the courtroom. Someone in the back gasped. "Did you tell anyone what was happening?" Mitchell asked. "We tried. We told the housekeeper, Mrs. Pritchard. She said we were ungrateful, and that the Baron had every right to discipline his property." "His property?" She used that word. "Yes, sir. Everyone in the house used it." Mitchell nodded. "Thank you, Ruth. Your Honor, I would like to call. I have questions for the girl." Whitmore interrupted. Standing, he approached Ruth with a paternal smile that made my stomach turn. "Now, Ruth, you seem like a smart girl, smart enough to know that telling stories can sometimes get you things you want. Is that correct?" Ruth looked confused. "Sir, I mean, if someone told you what to say, promised you nice clothes and a good home, if you said bad things about Mr. Grimwood, you might be tempted, mightn't you?" "No one told me what to say," Ruth said firmly. "I am just telling the truth as you understand it. But you are just a child. Perhaps you misunderstood Mr. Grimwood's intentions. Perhaps what seemed harsh to you was actually discipline meant to help you. He bored us." Ruth's voice rose. "He wrote it in his book. $600 for me and my sister, like we were cattle. How can I misunderstand that?" The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Caldwell banged his gavel. "Order." Whitmore tried again. "Mr. Grimwood says he gave you shelter, food, education. He gave us a locked room and beatings," Ruth said, her eyes bright with tears and fury. "He gave us to his sons like we were presents. And when we cried, he said we should be grateful because at least we were not on the street. But I would rather starve on the street as a free person than live one more day as someone's property." The silence that followed was absolute. Whitmore retreated. Judge Caldwell looked at Ruth with something like respect. "You may step down, child." Mitchell called other witnesses. Joseph, who described the locked eastern wing and the crying he heard at night. Clara, who testified about Thomas Grimwood's drunken boasting about breaking in the new girls. A doctor who had examined the twins and documented scars consistent with repeated beatings. Finally, Mitchell called me. I testified about what I had seen and heard, about the ledger I had found, about the Baron's threat to destroy me if I interfered. When I finished, Whitmore asked only one question. "Miss Carter, is it true that you have financial difficulties, that your sister faces eviction?" "Yes," I said. "So you had motivation to fabricate evidence against a wealthy man who might be forced to pay compensation?" I looked directly at him. "Sir, I had motivation to stay silent and keep my job and my home. I had every reason not to risk everything for 2 children I barely knew. But I looked in their eyes and I saw my own daughter, dead 6 years now, and I knew I could not live with myself if I did nothing. So yes, I risked everything, but not for money. For the simple reason that what was happening in that house was wrong, and someone had to say so." The courtroom stirred again. I saw people in the gallery nodding. Then the Baron himself took the stand. He denied everything. The ledger entries, he claimed, were misunderstood payment for legal indenture, not purchase. The locked rooms were for the girls' own safety. The discipline was necessary and appropriate for unruly children. "I took those girls in out of Christian charity," he said, his voice booming with false righteousness. I gave them shelter when they had none, and this is how I am repaid. With lies and accusations from troublemakers who wish to destroy a respected man. Mitchell stood for He walked slowly to the witness stand. Mr. Grimwood, you claim you took these girls in out of charity. Is that correct? Yes. Then why did you pay $600 for them? That was for transportation costs and legal fees. Legal fees for what? Indenture contracts require no such expense, unless Mitchell paused. Unless you were paying for something else. Something illegal. I was not. Mitchell pulled out a letter. This is correspondence from a Mr. Gerald Watts in Charleston, dated December 10th, 1894. It reads, the merchandise you requested is ready. 2 females, twins, age 12, price, as discussed. Payment due on delivery. Would you care to explain what merchandise he was referring to? The Baron's face went red. That is taken out of context, and this notation in your ledger. Property acquired for T&W Grimwood, purpose, household service, and companionship. What did you mean by companionship, sir? I meant they would be companions to my sons, playmates of sorts. Playmates? Your sons are grown men in their 20s. What kind of man gives 12-year-old girl playmates to his adult sons? The courtroom exploded. Women gasped. Men shouted. The judge's gavel cracked like thunder. The Baron stood, his face purple with rage. I will not sit here and be insulted by this charlatan. I have rights. I have standing in this community. You have neither rights nor standing that permit you to buy and sell children. Mitchell roared back. You claim to be a Christian man, but you have committed one of the gravest sins imaginable. You have stolen the freedom of 2 innocent children for your own purposes, and now you sit here and lie about it under oath. Judge Caldwell banged his gavel repeatedly. Order, order in this court. The Baron sat down slowly, his hands shaking with fury. Mitchell turned to the judge. Your Honor, the evidence is clear and overwhelming. The defendant purchased 2 children in violation of federal law. He held them against their will. He subjected them to abuse. He attempted to transport them across state lines to avoid discovery. There is no version of these facts that does not constitute multiple felonies. I ask that you find him guilty and sentence him accordingly. The judge was silent for a long moment, his old eyes moving from the Baron to the twins, to the crowded courtroom. This court will take a brief recess, he said finally. I will render my decision within the hour. We waited in terrible silence. Ruth and Naomi sat between Mrs. Walsh and me, small and brave. Martha prayed quietly. Joseph stood by the window, his face unreadable. Mitchell paced, organizing papers he did not need to organize. Finally, we were called back in. Judge Caldwell looked out at the packed courtroom. Then he spoke. I have presided over this court for 28 years. In that time, I have seen humanity at its best and its worst. Today, I have seen both. He paused. The evidence presented is not ambiguous. Mr. Cyrus Grimwood purchased 2 human beings in clear violation of the 13th Amendment. He held them in conditions amounting to slavery. He abused them. He attempted to hide his crimes by moving them out of state. The Baron started to stand. The judge's voice cut through. Sit down, sir. I am not finished. The Baron sat. There are those who will say, this is about politics or social upheaval, or the changing of old ways. It is not. This is about law. Simple, clear, federal law that states no person shall be held in bondage. That law applies to everyone, regardless of their age, their race, or their circumstances. And it certainly applies to a man who thought his money and influence placed him above such considerations. He looked at the Baron with cold finality. I find you guilty of all charges. I sentence you to 10 years in federal prison. Your assets will be liquidated to pay damages to Ruth and Naomi Williams, and to compensate this county for the costs of this trial. And I hereby issue a permanent injunction preventing you from ever holding a position of authority over children again. The gavel came down. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Shouts, the Baron roaring denials as the sheriff moved to restrain him. His sons fled through a side door. His lawyers gathered their papers with stony faces. I pulled Ruth and Naomi close as they wept not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of being believed, of being saved, of being seen as human. But Mrs. Walsh embraced us all. Martha laughed through her tears. Joseph stood in the back, his face wet, his shoulders finally unburdened. The Baron was led away in chains, still shouting threats that no one would remember by tomorrow. And in that moment, in that cold courthouse with winter light streaming through the windows, Justice happened. It was not perfect. It was not complete, but it was real. 5 years have passed since the trial. I write this final account to close the record and to testify that goodness, though it may come at great cost, is worth the price. Ruth and Naomi Williams live with Mrs. Rebecca Walsh, who legally adopted them 6 months after the trial. They attend school and are thriving. Ruth wants to become a teacher. Naomi has a gift for music and sings in the church choir. Their mother was located in Charleston and visits twice a year. Her heart grateful, but still broken by the time she lost with her daughters. The twins no longer wake screaming from nightmares. They laugh easily now. They have friends. They are children again, as they should be. The Baron died in prison 3 years into his sentence. His empire dissolved. His name a cautionary tale. His sons left the county and have not returned. The estate was sold at auction. A family from Philadelphia bought it and turned it into a school for girls of all backgrounds. The irony would be poetic if it were not so necessary. Mrs. Walsh continues her quiet acts of kindness. Her home is known throughout the county as a place of refuge. She and I have become dear friends. She says I gave her purpose in her later years. I tell her she gave me courage when I had none. My sister Martha and I still live in our small house. I no longer work at the mill. The Baron kept his promise to have me dismissed even from his prison cell. But I found work as a seamstress for several families who admired what I had done. I make enough to live simply. It is sufficient. Joseph left the estate after the trial and opened a small restaurant in town. He is a free man in truth now, not just in law. He says he sleeps peacefully for the first time in 40 years. Clara Bennett works at the county hospital as a cook. She says feeding people who are healing feels like prayer. Howard Mitchell continues his practice, taking cases others will not touch. He has become known throughout the state as a lawyer who values justice over profit. He visits Ruth and Naomi on their birthdays and brings them books. As for me, I am at peace. I did not set out to be brave or heroic. I was simply a woman who saw suffering and could not look away. But I learned that ordinary people, when they stand together, can accomplish extraordinary things. I learned that power is not permanent, that the mighty can fall, that the truth, when spoken clearly and supported by evidence, is stronger than threats or money or influence. I learned that children are not property, that human dignity cannot be bought or sold, that silence in the face of evil is itself a form of evil, and I learned that sometimes the cost of doing right is everything you have and that you pay it anyway, because living with yourself afterward is worth more than any material comfort. The church bells are ringing now. Sunday service will begin soon. I will walk with Martha to St. Michael's, where we will sit in our usual pew. Ruth and Naomi will sing with the choir, their voices clear and strong, no longer silenced or locked away. After the service, we will have lunch at Mrs. Walsh's home, fried chicken and greens, and cornbread, laughter around a crowded table, the kind of simple joy that men like the Baron could never purchase or understand. This is freedom. This is justice, not perfect, not without scars, but real. I write this so that anyone who reads it might know, you are not powerless. You are not too small to make a difference. One voice, when it speaks truth, can crack the foundation of the mightiest fortress, that and sometimes the humble seamstress, the kind widow, the quiet cook, the weary servant. These are the ones who change the world, stitch by stitch, act by act, choice by choice. The Baron bought 2 girls as Christmas gifts for his sons. What those girls did, with the help of ordinary people who refused to be ordinary, changed everything. May this record stand as testament. May it give courage to those who need it, and may it remind us all that the greatest power we possess is not wealth or influence, but the simple choice to do what is right when everything inside us whispers that it would be easier to do nothing. The storm has passed, the sun is shining, and we are free. Recorded this day by Evelyn Marie Carter, seamstress, witness, and survivor. Michael's Parish, Virginia, June 1899 to 1900. Finis.